September Let's Groove, Shining Star, just a few of the timeless hits that turned Earth, Wind, and Fire into one of the most iconic bands in music history. But before the Grammy wins and sold-out arenas, they were just a group of ambitious young men in 1969 chasing a dream in the shifting tides of R&B, funk, and jazz. So what happened to those original members who helped shape the soundtrack of a generation? Which legends are still alive and still performing in 2025? Who quietly faded from the spotlight? Stick around as we take a powerful look back at the original lineup of Earth, Wind, and Fire, from their earliest days to where they are now. You won't believe how much these stars have changed. Maurice White. Before Earth, Wind and Fire became the sound of cosmic soul and spiritual funk. Before September turned into a global anthem, and before the band's stage shows became the stuff of legend, there was one man with a vision, Maurice White. Born on December 19, 1941, in Memphis, Tennessee, Maurice was raised in a neighborhood steeped in gospel and blues. He would eventually move to Chicago, where he studied at the Chicago Conservatory of Music and became a session drummer at Chess Records, backing up legends like Etta James and Muddy Waters before he ever had a band of his own. That's where he began to absorb and combine the sounds of jazz, African rhythms, funk, gospel, classical, and even mysticism, a palette that would later become the hallmark of Earth, Wind, and Fire. In 1969, Maurice founded the band in Los Angeles. What started as a dream quickly became a revolution. Earth, Wind, and Fire wasn't just a group, it was a movement. White brought in vocalists like Philip Bailey, introduced the kalimba, an African thumb piano, into pop music, and created intricate horn arrangements that rivaled entire jazz orchestras. With albums like That's the Way of the World, All in All, and Gratitude, the band conquered charts and hearts across the globe. But behind the genius was a man fighting a quiet, grueling battle. In the 1990s, White was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. At first, he kept the condition hidden, still contributing in the studio and helping orchestrate the band's continued evolution. He stopped touring in 1994 but never gave up control. Even as the tremors began to affect his body, his mind remained sharp. He continued producing, writing, and guiding Earth, Wind, and Fire behind the scenes. He once said, "Music is the greatest communication in the world." And even as his body began to betray him, his music never stopped speaking. White also worked beyond the band. He produced Barbra Streisand's Emotion, Neil Diamond's Headed for the Future, and Ramsey Lewis's Sun Goddess, bringing his signature spiritual polish to their work. He was the executive producer on Brian Culbertson's Bringing Back the Funk, and he released a self-titled solo album in 1985. Even in the face of declining health, his 2019 posthumous album Manifestation proved the creativity had never died. At home, Maurice was a husband and father of 3, Hamea, Cabron, and Eden. He split his time between a serene home in Carmel Valley and a multi-level Los Angeles condo. He was a private man, known for his love of tennis, basketball, and family. To the outside world, he was Maurice White, the star. But to his loved ones, he was just Reese. His half-brother, Verdine White, continued to tour with Earth, Wind, and Fire. Another brother, Fred White, also joined the band for many years. It was always a family affair, and for Maurice, family was everything. On February 4, 2016, Maurice White passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 74. He had been living with Parkinson's for over 2 decades. When the world learned of his death, tributes poured in from legends and fans alike. Michael Jackson, Stevie Wonder, Smokey Robinson, Eric Clapton, Dionne Warwick, Steven Tyler, and so many others had long expressed their admiration for Maurice, many through a special site called StarTalk.org, launched in his honor years before his passing. Today, in 2025, Maurice White is remembered not just as the leader of Earth, Wind, and Fire, but as one of the most important architects of 20th century music. A man who refused to be boxed into genres, a man who dreamed in color and sound and turned a band into a global spiritual experience. He is enshrined in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the Vocal Group Hall of Fame, the Songwriters Hall of Fame, and the NAACP Image Awards Hall of Fame. Philip Bailey. Philip James Bailey is more than just one of the lead singers of Earth, Wind, and Fire. He is the voice that lifted the band's music into the heavens. At 74 years old, Bailey remains a guiding light in the legacy of a group that helped redefine soul, funk, and spirituality in American music. Though many know him for his soaring falsetto on tracks like Reasons and Fantasy, the story of Philip Bailey is one of both divine talent and unwavering purpose. Raised in Denver by a mother who supported his artistic curiosity, Bailey grew up immersed in the sounds of jazz, gospel, and Motown. Early influences included the emotional phrasing of Sarah Vaughan, the genius of Miles Davis, and the bold innovation of Stevie Wonder. Before fame found him, Bailey was studying at the University of Colorado and playing in a local R&B band called Friends in Love. In 1972, his life changed forever when Earth, Wind, and Fire founder Maurice White invited him to join the group. Bailey brought with him not only a once-in-a-generation voice, but also a sense of spiritual purpose that would soon define many of the band's most beloved tracks. Throughout the 1970s and 80s, Bailey became the ethereal falsetto floating above EWF's propulsive rhythms and horn-driven arrangements. He sang lead on Devotion, Keep Your Head to the Sky, Fantasy, and I've Had Enough, while also sharing vocal duties with Maurice White on massive hits like September, Shining Star, Boogie Wonderland, and That's the Way of the World. His voice, with a 4-octave range, became a symbol of the band's celestial and uplifting sound. When Maurice White stepped back from touring in the mid-1990s due to health issues, Bailey took on the role of frontman during live performances. To this day, he continues to share the stage with original members Verdine White and Ralph Johnson. Bailey's work beyond the band is equally impressive. In 1983, he released his debut solo album, Continuation, featuring the hit single, I Know. The following year, he took a bold step with The Wonders of His Love, a gospel album that showcased his deep Christian faith, a recurring theme in his life and music. In 1999, he pivoted once again, this time into jazz, with Dreams, an introspective album featuring collaborations with artists like Pat Metheny and Grover Washington Jr. His collaborations read like a who's who of musical legends. He sang on Alphonso Johnson's Yesterday's Dreams, contributed vocals to Stevie Wonder's In Square Circle, appeared on Shantae Moore's A Love Supreme, and delivered one of the standout performances on CeeLo Green's The Lady Killer with the soulful track Fool for You. Despite his public career, Bailey has always been private about his personal life. He has been married, is a father, and has spoken in interviews about the importance of family and faith. In recent years, Philip Bailey has embraced a more reflective chapter. He continues to tour with Earth, Wind, and Fire, bringing their timeless music to audiences both old and new. In 2019, he released Love Will Find a Way, a jazz-influenced solo album that blended Afrobeat, soul, and political consciousness. As of 2025, at 74 years old, Philip Bailey stands as one of the few remaining original voices of the 1970s soul explosion. While many have faded from the stage, he continues to defy time. His falsetto still shimmering, his presence still magnetic. Verdine White. Verdine White, born Verdine Adams Jr. on July 25, 1951 in Chicago, Illinois, isn't just the bassist of Earth, Wind, and Fire. He's its heartbeat. For over 5 decades, his energy, rhythm, and passion have electrified the band's sound and stage presence. Now 73 years old, Verdine remains an unshakable pillar of the legendary group. Verdine's childhood was steeped in music and ambition. His father, Verdine Sr., was a doctor who also played the saxophone, and his two brothers, Fred and Maurice, were both drummers. Music pulsed through the house like a second language. Inspired by jazz legends like Miles Davis and John Coltrane, and by Motown's thunderous groove, young Verdine fell in love with the bass at age 15 when he saw a double bass in his high school orchestra room. From that moment on, his path was clear. With encouragement from Maurice and his father, Verdine took private lessons from Roddie Vela of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra and was mentored on the electric bass by Louis Satterfield, a seasoned musician from Chess Records. Under Satterfield's guidance, Verdine learned discipline, musicality, and style, a foundation that would one day anchor one of the greatest bands in music history. In 1970, Maurice White called his younger brother with a life-changing offer. Join his new group in Los Angeles. That band was Earth, Wind, and Fire. Verdine packed his bass and flew west. From the beginning, Verdine's presence was magnetic. His flamboyant outfits, infectious smile, and animated stage moves made him instantly recognizable. But it was his bass playing, funky, fluid, and relentless, that gave the band its pulse. Whether laying down grooves for Shining Star, Getaway, or Boogie Wonderland, Verdine was always in motion, driving the rhythm with joyful urgency. As Earth, Wind, and Fire rose to global fame in the 1970s and 80s, winning Grammy Awards and selling over 90 million albums, Verdine became the group's kinetic force, on stage and off. Through lineup changes, personal losses, and shifting music trends, he never wavered. Even when Maurice White retired from performing in the 90s due to Parkinson's disease, Verdine stayed at the helm, preserving the band's legacy with Philip Bailey and Ralph Johnson. Outside of EWF, Verdine has left his mark through education and philanthropy. He co-authored Playing the Bass Guitar with his old mentor Satterfield, and later founded the Verdine White Foundation and the Verdine White Performing Arts Center, VW Pass, in Los Angeles. Organizations devoted to empowering underprivileged and gifted youth through music and the arts. In 2025, at age 73, Verdine surprised the world by stepping into the spotlight as a lead vocalist for the first time. His single Superman, dedicated to his late brother Maurice, was a deeply personal tribute and featured production by his wife Shelley Clark, herself a former member of the Ikettes and Honey Cone. The song marked a poignant, full-circle moment, the younger brother who had once followed Maurice into the studio, now honoring his legacy with his own voice. Behind the scenes, Verdine lives a life of stability and love. He's been married to Shelley for over 40 years. The couple resides in a historic Los Angeles home built in 1919 and share a son and a granddaughter. Verdine also has a twin sister, Geraldine, and shared unbreakable bonds with his late brothers Fred and Monty, both of whom contributed significantly to the Earth, Wind, and Fire story. Fred, a brilliant drummer, passed in 2023. Monty, the group's tour manager, died in 2020. Despite these heartbreaking losses, Verdine has never allowed grief to extinguish his light. His performances today still radiate with the same youthful intensity he had in 1975. Whether he's bouncing across the stage with a Fender slung low or mentoring young musicians in his foundation, Verdine White remains committed to the rhythm of life. Ralph Johnson. There's a quiet elegance to Ralph Johnson, an understated brilliance that has powered Earth, Wind, and Fire from the shadows of the drum kit. He wasn't the flashiest on stage, nor the loudest in interviews, but without him, the fire wouldn't burn quite the same. For over 5 decades, Johnson has been the rhythmic spine of one of the world's greatest bands, blending jazz finesse with soul, funk, and spiritual groove. Now 73 years old, he's still moving in rhythm, both with music and with life. Born Ralph Randolph Johnson on July 4, 1951, in Los Angeles, California, he was raised in a household where music was sacred. His father, a lyricist, and his mother, a vocalist, filled their home with melody. It was no surprise when at age 8, Ralph was gifted a snare drum. One lesson, and he was hooked. That same year, he began his lifelong love affair with rhythm. By the time he was a teenager, Ralph was immersed in R&B and funk, idolizing the sounds of Motown, Stax, and Sly and the Family Stone. A transformative moment came at age 13 when he attended a James Brown concert. 3 drum kits on stage. It was like witnessing thunder take form. That night, Ralph didn't just watch a show. He found his purpose. He cut his teeth in local LA bands like the Teen Turbans and the Masters Children before catching the eye and ear of Maurice White in 1971. White, who had just dismantled Earth, Wind, and Fire's original lineup, was rebuilding from scratch. When he saw Ralph play in a local club, he saw not just a drummer, but a soul with precision, discipline, and feel. Ralph was invited to audition, and by the end of the year, he became one of the newest members of Earth, Wind, and Fire. The rest is music history. Ralph Johnson's percussion didn't just keep time, it gave Earth, Wind, and Fire a heartbeat. With Philip Bailey's soaring falsetto, Maurice White's vision, and Verdine's driving bass, Ralph's grooves anchored hits like September, Fantasy, Boogie Wonderland, and Let's Groove. As the band climbed to dizzying heights, earning 6 Grammy Awards, a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction, and over 90 million albums sold, Ralph remained both steady and curious. He explored producing, songwriting, and collaborations with artists from different generations and genres, from Drake to Meghan Trainor. In 2019, he released Coast to Coast, Everything's Cool, his first solo project, showing the world a different, more personal side of his artistry. But Ralph Johnson has never been defined by music alone. Away from the spotlight, he is a man of many disciplines. He holds black belts in both Tang Soo Do and Kung Fu Sansu, and when he's not on tour, he teaches martial arts at his longtime instructor's school. He's also a certified scuba diver and an aviation enthusiast with a student pilot's license. Art, jazz, and meditation are constant companions in his life. His family life has remained deliberately private, shielded from the chaos of celebrity. But those close to him describe him as grounded, spiritual, and loyal. Someone who listens more than he speaks, and whose calm nature has helped hold Earth, Wind, and Fire together through countless transitions. In recent years, Ralph has become more reflective. He often speaks of gratitude for his health, his brothers in music, and the generations of fans who've kept Earth, Wind, and Fire alive across decades. And even as he steps into his 70s, his rhythm hasn't skipped a beat. Whether in the studio, on stage, or mentoring young musicians, Ralph Johnson remains a master of his craft and a student of life. Larry Dunn. Long before synthesizers ruled the charts or stadiums pulsed to keyboard solos, Larry Dunn was already sculpting sonic landscapes that transcended genres. He wasn't just Earth, Wind, and Fire's keyboardist. He was their alchemist. Born Lorenzo Dunn in Denver, Colorado, Larry was the son of an Italian mother and African-American father. Music was part of the family fabric from the beginning, and Larry took to it instinctively. By the time he attended East High School, he was already known as a prodigy, a teen who could read, arrange, and compose music with the confidence of a seasoned professional. In 1972, while still in his early 20s, Dunn moved to Los Angeles, and fate intervened. Maurice White, then in the process of rebuilding Earth, Wind, and Fire, heard Larry play and invited him to join. It was a pivotal moment, not just for Larry, but for the band itself. As Earth, Wind, and Fire's musical director and keyboardist, Larry Dunn helped define their sound. His chord progressions shimmered with soul and sophistication. His work on Shining Star, a song he co-wrote, would later be enshrined in the Grammy Hall of Fame. He was just as instrumental behind the scenes, crafting arrangements, co-writing songs, and shaping the elaborate live shows that made EWF more than a band. It made them a movement. Between 1972 and 1983, Larry was a constant creative force within the group, contributing to albums like That's the Way of the World, Gratitude, and All in All, records that didn't just top charts, but influenced entire generations of musicians. He wasn't the frontman. He didn't sing the high notes or dance in sequined jumpsuits, but in the studio, he was a magician. Yet, in 1983, Larry stepped away from Earth, Wind, and Fire. The reasons were never dramatic or bitter, just the natural course of growth. He had poured over a decade of his life into the group and was ready to expand his musical identity. His post-EWF years were anything but quiet. Dunn lent his keyboard magic to the Emotions' 1976 album Flowers, Ronnie Law's Flame, Hubert Law's Land of Passion, and D.D. Bridgewater's Bad for Me. He produced and arranged for jazz and soul luminaries, while also composing for artists like Ronnie Law's well into the 1990s. Later, he appeared on Brian Culbertson's 2008 and 2014 albums. In 2013, decades after his departure, Dunn reunited briefly with Earth, Wind, and Fire for their album Now, Then, and Forever. It was a full-circle moment. Though no longer a touring member, his fingerprints were still etched in the band's DNA. And while the spotlight has often shone on vocalists like Maurice White or Philip Bailey, insiders and musicians know Larry Dunn was the silent force. Away from the keyboards, Dunn has kept much of his personal life private. Those who know him describe him as thoughtful, intensely spiritual, and deeply loyal to his roots. He remains devoted to music, mentorship, and occasionally performs or records under his own name. His humility is striking for someone who helped define a sound that has sold over 90 million records and reshaped the music industry. As of 2025, Larry Dunn lives a quieter life, but not a forgotten one. His influence is everywhere, from neo-soul artists trying to replicate the harmonies of the 70s to producers building grooves atop the chord patterns he once laid down with ease. And every time Shining Star plays, his legacy plays with it. Jessica Cleaves. Long before the towering horns and glittering stage shows of Earth, Wind and Fire dazzled the world. There was a voice, soulful, elegant, and otherworldly, that helped shape the band's earliest sound. Her name was Jessica Cleaves, and while her name may not echo as loudly as some of her male counterparts, her contribution to the golden age of funk and soul deserves to be remembered. Born on December 10, 1948 in Los Angeles, California, Jessica was raised in a deeply spiritual and artistic household. Her mother, Mary Gladys Cleaves, worked as a librarian. Her father, Lane C. Cleaves II, served as a U.S. postal worker. But it was her grandfather, Bishop Lane C. Cleaves Sr., who infused in her a sense of community, reverence, and power, values she would later channel through her music. Jessica's talent emerged early, and her passion for performance led her to study music at the California Institute of the Arts and later at UCLA. Among her classmates was none other than legendary songwriter Skip Scarborough. By the late 1960s, she had already made waves as a founding member of the Friends of Distinction, delivering lush vocals on hits like Grazing in the Grass and Going in Circles. But it was in 1971, when she joined Earth, Wind, and Fire, that Jessica stepped into a larger stage. She replaced Helena Davis and quickly became a central part of the band's early transformation, contributing her ethereal tone to their albums Last Days and Time, 1972, and Head to the Sky, 1973. On tracks like Zanzibar and Keep Your Head to the Sky. Yet, just as Earth, Wind, and Fire was about to ascend into global superstardom, Jessica quietly exited the stage. Internal tensions and Maurice White's tightening creative direction led to her departure shortly after Head to the Sky. In a lesser artist, it might have been the end, but for Jessica, it was just a turning point. She moved to Detroit and entered another universe entirely. Parliament Funkadelic, George Clinton's legendary psychedelic funk collective. There, Jessica found a new kind of freedom. Between 1976 and 1981, she sang on iconic albums such as Tales of Kid Funkadelic, Uncle Jam Wants You, Trombipulation, and The Electric Spanking of War Babies. With Parliament and Funkadelic, she shed the restraint of pop soul and dove headfirst into raw cosmic experimentation. She remained part of the P-Funk family into the 1990s, appearing on George Clinton's solo albums like Computer Games, 1983, and R&B Skeletons in the Closet, 1986, and later on the P-Funk All-Stars Dope Dogs, 1995. Yet outside of diehard funk fans, her name rarely got the recognition it deserved. Unlike many of her contemporaries, Jessica Cleaves never chased fame. She never craved the spotlight, she simply served the music. But her personal life was marked by solitude and quiet resilience. Never married and without children of her own, she remained deeply connected to her godson, director Armand Araujo. In her later years, the two began filming a documentary about her life, Jessica Cleaves, My Friends of Distinction. Sadly, that documentary was never completed. Jessica Cleaves passed away on May 2, 2014, in Los Angeles after suffering complications from a stroke. She was 65 years old. Andrew Woolfolk. Long before sax solos vanished from pop music, Andrew Woolfolk made them sing, wailing, dancing, and soaring through the unforgettable grooves of September, Boogie Wonderland, and Let's Groove. He wasn't just a sideman. He was a secret weapon. Behind his sunglasses and signature cool, Woolfolk's saxophone infused earth, wind, and fire sound with a shimmering layer of soul that could slice through brass, bass, and funk with effortless style. Born on October 11, 1950 in San Antonio, Texas, and raised in Denver, Colorado, Andrew Woolfolk didn't grow up chasing fame. He chased melodies. Trained as a classical saxophonist and educated in music at East High School in Denver, he found his true calling in the horn-fueled magic of funk and R&B. His journey to the big stage began in 1973 when he joined Earth, Wind and Fire, just as the band was transitioning from jazz rock roots into full-blown spiritual funk superstardom. For over a decade, Woolfolk was the heart of the horn section. From 1973 to 1985, and again from 1987 to 1993, his sax lit up every corner of the stage and studio. But Woolfolk wasn't just a performer, he was a craftsman. Offstage, he became a sought-after session musician, collaborating with icons like Phil Collins, Level 42, and Denise Williams. Despite his success, Woolfolk kept a low profile in his later years. He wasn't one to chase the spotlight. His personal life remained largely private, known only to close friends and fellow musicians. But his bond with Earth, Wind and Fire never faded. In 2000, he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame alongside his bandmates. Then came the quiet battle. In April 2022, vocalist Philip Bailey revealed that Andrew had passed away after an extended illness. Woolfolk had been fighting the condition for several years. No details were ever made public, only that he died surrounded by love and dignity. He was 71 years old. Bailey's tribute said it best. Great memories, great talent, funny, competitive, quick-witted, and always styling. Booski. I'll see you on the other side, my friend. Roland Bautista. While Earth, Wind and Fire was known for its elaborate stagecraft and brass-powered anthems, behind it all was a rhythm, steady, rich, electric. And for many of the band's most soulful moments, that rhythm came from Roland Bautista's fingers. With his guitar, he didn't just keep time. He expanded it, stretching grooves into new dimensions, blending jazz, funk, and rock with seamless ease. Born on May 30th, 1951, in Los Angeles, Roland Bautista was a master technician with the soul of a poet. He joined Earth, Wind and Fire in 1972 during a turbulent reorganization of the lineup. His work graced the band's early LP, Last Days and Time, 1972, where his intricate guitar work helped sculpt the group's transition from jazz fusion into something more expansive and commercially potent. But just as quickly as he arrived, Bautista departed. He left after that album to explore solo ventures and expand his musical reach. In the late 1970s, he released 2 solo albums, Bautista, 1977, and The Heat of the Wind, 1978, which blended jazz, funk, and Latin rhythms with astonishing complexity. He also became a prolific session guitarist, lending his skills to the Crusaders, Randy Crawford, George Duke, Jackson 5, and even Tom Waits. In 1981, he rejoined Earth, Wind and Fire just as the band was undergoing a stylistic shift. Bautista played on 3 studio albums, Rays, Powerlight, and Electric Universe, before the group temporarily disbanded in 1983. Despite his immense talent, Roland never sought fame. Friends and colleagues described him as soft-spoken, introspective, and deeply dedicated to his craft. Unlike the flashier frontmen, he let the music speak for him. And for those who listened closely, it spoke volumes. Sadly, Bautista's life was cut short. In 2012, he died in Los Angeles at the age of 60. Well, that's all that we have for you for now. Were you surprised to see where any of the Earth, Wind, and Fire member ended up later on in their careers? Did you know that so many of the band's members have since passed away? Let us know in the comments section down below. And as always, thanks for watching.